Welcome to Two Homes. This podcast explores the relationship between our inner world and the systems we live within, from our bodies and beliefs to the businesses, destinations, and environments we shape. Because sustainability that isn't embodied doesn't last, and well-being that stays at the surface level doesn't change much at all. Together, we'll explore what it really takes to build systems that support people, places, and the planet over the long term. From leadership and organizational culture to the hidden patterns that shape how we live, work, and travel. This is an invitation to look a little deeper and to discover how meaningful change often starts closer to home than we think. Hi, and welcome to Two Homes. I'm your host, Sarah Rhodes, and today's topic is duality, why it's not all or nothing. This is something I'm excited to dig into. It's something I come up against a lot, and it's something I've experienced myself. And it's holding us back from creative possibilities and different solutions in how we look at things. It commonly shows up in conversations I'm having as we can't do sustainability. We're not ready yet. We don't have any ability. It's not decided by us. These kind of things that feel restrictive. When people feel restricted, like they can't take action even if they really want to because of perceived limitations in operating systems or hierarchy, This is the all or nothing problem we're discussing today. Because the truth is that there is so much more wiggle room. There is so much more flexibility than we actually realize. And I mentioned myself, so a couple of examples of how all or nothing thinking has shown up for me. One not related to work, but I think is quite interesting. Several years ago, when I embarked on the journey of becoming a vegetarian, I had avoided it for such a long time because I thought that if I became vegetarian, I would also need to become vegan. This was the all or nothing thinking being my enemy. And so as such, I didn't become vegetarian when I first started thinking it might have been a good idea. I'll let you in on something else. There's no absolute. I am no longer vegetarian or veganish anymore. And so I think we back ourselves into these corners. I certainly did in that situation where I thought being vegetarian meant I had to go all the way in and be completely vegan. And then I thought it was going to be for forever. But as I've learned to be more adaptable, more open-minded, more flexible, I've realized that I can be conscious about the food that I'm eating. I can eat for the planet and my own health without it being completely extreme. It can be mindful, but it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And more recently, it showed up in my work. I'd previously been working for a certification body, and I've always wanted to keep working on plastic-free Southeast Asia. But I thought that I couldn't. I thought that it wasn't working in Australia. And at the start of this year, I realized maybe I am meant to go all in with this. But even that is not as black and white as it might seem. So whilst I am now fully dedicated to running this business and to being all in, I can see so many creative possibilities for other income streams that take the pressure off this being the one and only thing. It's really interesting how our minds do this because we love certainty and we love solutions and we love simplicity. But life isn't simple or certain, and we can't control things the way we think we can. So where I've learned to find that flexibility and open up opportunities, I believe is available to all of us. And it also has a really fantastic place in sustainability. Because I often feel like the commentary is, we're not ready yet to get help on this. And that's probably the point where help would be able to help things move along. Many people often feel like they don't have their full strategy worked out yet, therefore they can't do anything else. But the thing is, taking action and engaging and trying things out can help inform your strategy if you don't have one in place. And of course, one of the bigger obstacles is we don't have budget approval. So what can you do without needing budget? There are also plenty of creative solutions around that as well. Not having the right hire in place. How will you know if the hire is right if you don't have any frameworks or goals or anything established to begin with? So if any of these things feel like they're conversations you've had, I think there's a bigger opportunity here not to be relying on that one person, that one strategy, that one budget line before you begin. One of the things I'll come back to time and again is if there's no conversation, if there's no shared focus on sustainability, then all of these things are going to be really difficult. Feeling ready, having a strategy, allocating budget, finding the right hire. If you don't know what you're going to spend your budget on, how will you know how to allocate it? If you don't feel ready, how will you become ready unless you begin? So something that really helps to do that when we're trying to deal with something that perhaps isn't front and top of mind, or I should say more to the point, we're not dealing with something because it's not front and top of mind. The opportunity is to bring it into focus, because the more we focus on something, the more our minds are going to seek solutions, because the mind loves certainty and resolution. And in order to bring it into focus, we need to start having conversations about it. And this shouldn't happen in isolation, because in isolation it feels heavy. In shared team-wide conversations, it starts to feel a little bit more approachable. We can start to approach it in the way that nobody knows everything, but everybody knows something. And so sharing those somethings together build the collective knowledge, build the collective awareness, and then you start to feel a little bit more ready. It's also interesting how much culture plays a role in this, and why culture is so integral to sustainability as a holistic approach to operating. I was delighted by the enthusiasm, the array of solutions, and the openness, the creativity that I would regularly see when I ran workshops in Southeast Asia. Culturally, in Australia, it's very different. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I think we have a real opportunity in Australia to get out of this binary thinking, start to realize that there's a whole spectrum available to us, so many opportunities, so many possibilities, and that doing things differently to how they've always been done can actually be a relief. It can be energizing. It can just really start to shift some of the things that have gone on for so long but are now starting to change. And so I wonder whether you're in the cohort of people who are interested in exploring this, or if perhaps you're feeling like it's safer to stick with doing things the way that they've always been done. I have a feeling, since you're listening to this podcast, that it might be the former. And so we're going to dive into that and in more detail so that we can see how this might apply in our different workplaces. On the topic of culture, this has traditionally been quite hard in Australia. We've been taught not to stand out, not to stand tall, not to be better than anybody else. And so that makes it feel like a big risk to go and do something different to what everybody else is doing. But it's also the only way that things will ever change from the way that they've been. Another obstacle I see is perfectionism and how perfect can get in the way of progress. I think that for so long, so many of us have strived for perfection, and perfection can stop us from starting something new, from doing something different. You know, the old adage of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But the thing is that so many things are broken, yet we defend them and say that they are working. But really the fear is changing. And so the more we leave things, the more we ignore the imminent changes that are coming, the bigger they loom. A problem dealt with quickly and swiftly and in collaboration, team-wide as necessary, collaboratively, with more than just one mind on the topic, is overturned, is resolved so much faster than a problem that sits lurking in the corner, ignored at the bottom of the inbox until it becomes critical. So I'm one of many before me who have delved into duality and what it means in philosophy, in Buddhism, and in my Nia practice. These are traditions that have been sitting with complexity for centuries. And so how is it that we've ended up in this culture where we feel like things must be one thing or another? And I suspect that it is closely linked to the busyness and the survival mode of operating that is so prevalent in today's world. What is true is that two things can be true at the same time. We like to polarize things. And I think one of the common ones that comes up in this space is, well, if it's sustainable, it's more expensive. We've talked about this on the podcast. If it's sustainable, it's not luxurious enough. And many other myths that polarize these things and almost make an enemy of the thing that would actually help us progress, succeed, and flourish. And I think that is one of the damaging things of survival mode is that we think that the bare minimum is good enough. And yet we're unable to move to that opportunity of flourishing and enjoying our work and enjoying it for ease, not just adrenaline. So if we turn to nature and have a look at that, nothing is purely one thing or another. Ecosystems have gradients. They have this spectrum. Seasons are not always summer. It's not always perfect and beautiful. And yet, everything is perfect and beautiful. However, if we look at the seasons, we look at the evolution, as sure as we see the sun every morning and as sure as night will fall every day, as sure as we will have winter every year and summer every year as well, when we see how nature behaves, there's more cadence, there's more ability to hold beauty in all seasons, to understand that leaves will fall from trees, they will die, they will be composted, and that compost will go into benefiting the growth, the sustainability, the health of the tree in the next season. So just like the only good thing is growth mentality and that low months are bad, we've been getting this quite wrong for such a long time. So when we can learn to appreciate all of those seasons and embrace them rather than resisting them, we begin to move away from that all or nothing thinking. Case in point, it's winter in Australia right now. And winter is something that I tried avoiding for many years and successfully did so by living in countries or moving to countries for the winter period. Since moving back to Australia, I have been challenging my beliefs, my thoughts, my resistance to winter. And to be fair, this winter is particularly mild in Sydney. But I started this by becoming aware of my resistance and then opening myself up to curiosity. This is my third consecutive winter in Sydney. And 2 winters ago, I started asking myself, what do I like about winter? I like the smell of wood fires. I like the crisp freshness on a sunny morning. I am so lucky to be able to walk to a beach really close by. And whilst it's cold on the way there, the sunshine, the sound, the seagulls, the sand, all of it is beautiful. This winter has been the easiest winter for me. Partially, I think, because it's a bit more mild, but also because I've spent 3 winters now investigating, being curious, finding the things that I do like to open me up to what is, accepting that winter is going to come around every year. And this year in particular, escape wasn't an option. And I think that was a real lesson in that embracing winter is part of everything. So when we look to practical business contexts, what does holding on to duality look like? It might look like offering ceramic coffee cups as the default, that single-use cups are on request only, not putting them on top of the self-serve coffee machine, but actually making it a little bit more challenging, creating an environment that supports this, but not needing it to feel like no single-use cups are available. It might look like an iterative approach to adding LED lights in. It might look like having water refills available, but still having single-use bottles in the rooms. Just because reuse and sustainability and minimizing single use are a priority doesn't mean that it needs to be all or nothing overnight. We can create momentum and start to do things in a way that naturally unfolds, that moves through a transition of having two options, of then making the better option the default while the other option is available. I would talk about this a lot in the before plastic straws bans were so common everywhere. And it looks like not putting a straw in a drink by default. And even though we're not using plastic straws in Australia, we're still using single-use straws. So what does service say about serving cocktails? What about letting the customer opt in? What about making them available but not insisting that every drink has to have one? These are the kind of things that still play out more than a decade of doing this work. I'm amazed in Sydney how often I'm asked if I want a plastic bag for one item at the grocery store. What if we flipped the narrative in customer service and just acknowledge that for one item, most people are going to be okay with carrying it? Creating awareness, getting out of survival mode so we can see that the customer already has their reusable bag with them, or perhaps a large satchel or handbag from work. When we're running on autopilot, where we're sticking to one side of the all or nothing. And so it's really about creating more nuance. It's about being more flexible. Our rigidity is what is getting in the way here. And I've been on a big lesson around rigidity as well. So I'm not saying that it's easy, but awareness is where it really begins. It's also not about doing the bare minimum. It's about starting and creating some momentum and building from there. The rigidity and the binary thinking produces binary outcomes. Either we're sustainable or we're not. Either we invest or we don't. Either it worked or it failed. But that's not what life is like. Life is messier than that. Yes, it's important, so important to celebrate the wins. And in sustainability more than anything, it's important to be pragmatic, clear, and honest about the journey, about the evolution. It's about letting the messy middle be seen. And I think we hate mess and we don't like to look at things partially done. I've seen this on my business journey when I'm looking for advice and inspiration on how to run a business. And so many of the stories are, well, it was a struggle and I worked out of my basement for a year and then now I'm a millionaire. That's not real life. When we can interrogate and examine and sit with the discomfort of the progress, or maybe even start to enjoy the journey of the seasons, then we start to be more creative. Then we start to have more fun with this. Then we stop expecting overnight success, overnight perfection, and we stop being worried about transparency because actually the gold is in the transparency. Businesses attract, retain, and gather more loyalty from customers when they're honest than when they try to polish things up and look perfect. When leadership teams learn to hold this complexity, to acknowledge the good, to acknowledge what's still being worked on, that also gives permission within the culture of the organization for people to own up to what's worked, what hasn't worked, or what's still a work in progress. It builds trust. And in a world where staff retention is such a challenge, this trust is really important. When teams are allowed to experiment, to get things partially right, to learn and iterate and continue to explore, and to also, meet some things that didn't work. There's the famous Edison quote of, it took 1,000 attempts of how not to make a light bulb and one attempt that did. When we're working in teams, we often think we have to get it right 100% of the time. And managers also perpetuate that lie that we have to get it right all of the time. But if you're not getting things wrong, then you're not growing. The lessons are in the errors. When you get lost, you remember the way the next time because you learnt by going the wrong way. So when we're able to tap into that, when we're able to harness that creativity to celebrate the things that didn't work as well as the things that did work, then new, interesting, unique, and novel solutions start to come forward. I may have shared this example before, but there was one team I was working with and they wanted to find a creative way to engage their guests when it comes to sort of like weekly or daily specials, like, your unique seasonal offerings or different things that are happening or events or what have you during a guest stay. And so instead of having the TV automatically on in the room when the guest checked in, they created a bit of an Alice in Wonderland vibe by printing a QR code on a macaron, and then that would activate the information and the welcome message for the guest. And I just love this example. It's fun, it's creative. Can't you just imagine walking into a hotel room and seeing a little sign that says, "Scan me first, then eat me," and being shown a custom list of what's on in the area, what's happening during your stay, what specials are on in the restaurant, what activities you might like to join in on. Doesn't that sound fun? And when we're stuck in all or nothing thinking, when we're not nurturing that creativity, we miss the opportunity for such magic and fun as that. So how do we hold this at the same time? How do we accept that whilst we may have LEDs throughout our entire hotel, but we haven't yet implemented a reusable water bottle system? How do we acknowledge that there's still more work to do and that maybe we don't know where the next step is yet? How do we be proud of energy reduction results but not stop there? And how do we communicate all of this honestly? An example I saw maybe about a year or so ago was from Air New Zealand. They did reusable cups. I believe it was between Sydney and Auckland, and their sustainability manager shared about this on LinkedIn. And the start of the post was something like, yeah, we know that the biggest footprint in aviation is the fuel, but we needed to do this as well. It's not tokenistic, it's holistic. It's about acknowledging the big things and acknowledging that some of the bigger things are more complex. They take more time. There is more risk. It needs more attention. But something like reusable cups can be a win, can create a new experience, can reduce waste, expenses, and can create a different kind of environment for someone who's traveling between Sydney and Auckland. I love that. They didn't ignore the fact that there were other things that needed work. They were honest and they held both. And they acknowledged that it was on this flight and not across all of their flights. This is how we sit in the discomfort. This is how we sit in the in-between. We make progress, we test things, and we understand the direction that we're going in. And sometimes I think perhaps we need to explore the extremes before we can come back to the middle, before we can find our equilibrium. When I began Plastic Free Southeast Asia and was examining my own plastic use, I really got quite extreme with it, to the point that Sure, I had no single-use plastics, but I would be upset if I ever did get some. I would make decisions about what I bought, particularly with food, and it started to impact the nutrition that I was receiving. So perhaps going from being completely, maybe not completely, but reasonably oblivious and unaware of the single-use plastic in my life to being extremely hyper-focused and all in, I now find I've got my equilibrium. It doesn't always make me happy for some of the plastic that I need to use, but I can accept that it's not ever going to be perfect with things as they are at the moment. And that's okay. I can balance my health and nutrition alongside my desire to try and do the best I can all the time. I can accept if someone buys me a coffee and it's in a single-use cup. I'll probably make a comment. And the other day, in fact, I declined a coffee because the only option was to have it in a takeaway cup. And I'm like, that's okay. I don't need a coffee if that's the cost. On another day, in another situation, I might be willing to make that sacrifice. It's not always the same. It's having that discernment and that capability to make the decision and see what works best in a given scenario. So if you've been waiting until everything is ready before you begin, or you've been wanting things to be perfect before you start, or you've been trying to hold it all yourself before you share something with your team, I encourage you to relax your defenses, to invite help, to encourage conversation and dialogue, and to stop waiting for everything to be perfect and just start. Start messy, start collaboratively, ask for help. Help is here to support you, not to judge you. Duality requires a kind of courage that binary thinking doesn't. It's the courage to be seen mid-journey rather than just at the final destination. And this is hard. This is something that most people aren't willing to risk, but that most people are missing the opportunity for what is completely normal. And how do we make that normal? By knowing that honesty and transparency are where trust lives, we can start to let some of the mess be seen. To understand that globally, when we look at our environment, we are in a messy transition right now. This I believe to be true, that we have been going down one path for such a long time that it's hard to admit that we're on the wrong path. It's hard to think again, in the words of Adam Grant. But thinking again, not doubling down on sunk investments, is where the opportunity lies, is where the satisfaction, the growth, the collaboration, the connection, the meaning and the purpose of life and the work that we do begins. No one person or one company can solve the environmental crisis we're in. But if we all continue to do nothing, we also can't solve it. So wouldn't it be more fun to try some things and see what happens? To bring more nuance and innovation and togetherness into how we improve things? A rising tide floats all boats, and real change starts to hold when we can work together, we can share the progress and collaborate. So if you've been waiting for things to be perfect before you begin, what's one thing you could actually implement, share with your team, and start to do right now that doesn't require any more work, any more thinking, any more hesitation? I hope you'll go and do that now. Thanks for being here with me on Two Homes podcast. I am really enjoying the process, all seasons of the process, because at the beginning it was full summer. I was excited. I let the floodgates of so many ideas come through. And more recently, there's been a few more challenging episodes where I've had to interrogate my thoughts. I've had to sit in the darkness a little bit longer to articulate what I want to bring forward. As always, I hope this is helpful and rewarding. And if you've got a colleague who you think might benefit from hearing some of these ideas too, please do share this podcast with them. And I'm always grateful for reviews. It helps more people find the podcast and look at sustainability in perhaps a new light that's a bit more varied, a little less rigid, and perhaps a whole lot more meaningful. Thank you. I will see you next.